All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. Thanks for watching. Excuse me. All right, we're up to episode 4. These episodes are coming out so quick. I have other stuff I want to do, but I'm just trying to stay up on the campaign stuff. So this is just basically going to be for my campaign for Shawnee County District 1 and for 2026. And this is my comments on the meeting that happened on May 4th, which was something of a long meeting, although not a lot actually happened. It was mostly just a discussion. The first thing was about the Extension Office's quarterly report from Candace Stiles. I guess this is like a KSU outreach. There wasn't really any details about why this thing exists, legally speaking, in terms of there was no votes or like where this money is coming from or whatever. It's just some service that's being provided and they're talking about it. They introduced their new agricultural agent. They talked about family and consumer sources helping 216 people do their Medicare, their Medicaid stuff, which, as I'm listening to it, of course, they're selling it like it's a beautiful, wonderful thing because there's these elderly people and they have questions and they can talk to people and get those questions answered. And they talked about how, 61% of them saved like money totaling up to $63,700. 80% of them said how useful the service was. And it kind of reminds me of a service I went to recently that's funded by tax dollars for people trying to start up a food business. And it was absolutely very useful. There was a lot of bureaucrats there talking up all of their knowledge about all of this bureaucratic red tape that they can help me get through. And the entire time I'm just thinking to myself, well, if we didn't have all this bureaucratic red tape, I really wouldn't need these services. So it's like being stolen from a very sexy thief, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like if we didn't have the government being in charge of these people's health care, they wouldn't need me going to the government being like, what the hell's going on with my Medicare? Even if those actual employees were very knowledgeable and helpful, it's that the government creates problems and then they act like they're actually giving you solutions. And I don't know, I get frustrated about this stuff. But like I said, it was more or less a report. So let's just kind of keep on going through it. They talked about a walking program they did for seniors, which I kind of get. They didn't mention any money about it, which I like, But I mean, like, if that's something that's happening, whatever. Um, they did help a bunch of seniors with their income tax. They said that it spent like 30 volunteers, which is great that there's volunteers doing that. There's still some level of overhead that is the extension office quarterly report. And again, I'm just like, well, if we didn't have income tax, we wouldn't need these government employees helping out all the people that are afraid of going to jail because they can't even figure out how to do their income tax. And then they gave some numbers about, whatever, like the people that they helped. And like I said, um, education outreach. They talked about some demographics being like Shawnee County's demographics. They talked about food, nutrition, education, which I mean, like, I get in the sense that, like, okay, they're like, there's like 4-H outreach for career readiness, a master gardening program, the community vitality student business development, where these students like built a business or pitched a business and it was like they could win awards. These are all like really interesting and nice services. It's just, yeah, but could they be provided by the private sector? And even like with the thing with the income tax and the volunteers and all the volunteers that work with it, there's still some overhead that's being funded through taxation, as I understand it. Or maybe it's being funded by the tuition from K State, which is granted a public school, but I don't know. I don't know where the tax dollars are that's more or less funding this. They just basically talked about it and everyone was like, okay, cool, thanks. And then the next thing that happened is a Mike Iketon came up and basically talked about this hockey center. It also has some pickleball courts on it. He wants to get it built at 21st and Urish, which is where that new golf club we were talking about last week is also getting built. It's also where there's a bunch of pickleball courts outside, and there's like a water park and a picnic area. The land itself is owned by the county. And basically, to fast forward, Mike and then the architect from SDG Architect, I think, um, they basically did their sales pitch. And, it's really interesting and cool in the sense that I like hockey and stuff. It would be really nice for there is currently no facility in Shawnee County for hockey. We do have a hockey team. They have to go to Kansas City to practice. Um, they play at the Stormont Vale Event Center where they have to build, like the rink and then thaw the rink between things because they're using that event center for all sorts of stuff as opposed to just having a stay in place hockey rink. There's a certain benefit to that, but it's not at the Stormont. It's building a whole brand new one. Um, he gave something of a the Mike Iketon, I want to say. Basically, he gave out some numbers where he was projecting third year revenue like at 3.5 million. Um, they were talking about how this is going to be operated. If it's going to be operated by the Parks and Rec Department under the Shawnee County Commission or what. When he was like yes, or another nonprofit, and that's where I was like, I mean, I think it's a cool idea. It's obviously a cool idea. Anyone who says this isn't a cool idea is that's a cool idea. I just think it should be a private business that does it, rather than spending the tax dollars. And that's kind of where things got a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to open it up after his presentation to the commissioners. And I know Kevin Cook, what is he, District 2, he was pretty strong about the financial implications of it. At one point, he was like, you got to bring like $12 million at least, and then we can start issuing bonds or something to that effect. I will say that despite talking about revenue in terms of just raw numbers, there was no sort of number thrown out by the presenter, the guy that wants it, as far as how much this is going to cost or the upkeep, right? He talked about revenue. He never talked about profit. And as far as I'm concerned, you open up a hockey rink, let's make that for profit. That should be a for profit entity. If it's not a for profit thing, and they were even talking about these community centers, oh, well, I don't remember the name. But he's like, oh, remember that community center and how how much money it costs and the drain it is on us financially, but it's so important for the community. Okay, the community center is important for the community, but you just admitted that it's a drain on the budget. And now you want to get a bunch of money that you don't have so that you can put another drain on the county commission, like the upkeep. Like it's another thing that you lose money on. Spend money to lose money is basically what it is. It's a neat idea, and I would love to see something like this get built. There was no vote on it. It was just, I guess, the guy just kind of wanted to have his presentation and just kind of put the thought out there. And for the most part, they're like, okay, well, thanks for the idea. Like, come back in a year with $15 million dollars and we'll talk. But as of right now, I don't. He really wasn't asking for anything either. Like he wasn't even asking like, no, what I need is I need 7 million or I need 17 million. Like it was just like, hey, like it was kind of like a pipe dream, I guess, for me and my pipe dream businesses that I dream up, and then it's like, oh yeah, I know you're just blowing smoke. You really don't crunch. You haven't crunched the numbers yet, and there's a lot of numbers to be crunched when you're talking about that much money, especially given the financial situation that this county is in. And you know what? That was another thing where they talked about was then they kind of started playing the virtue signaling thing, where they're like, oh, well, what are we going to cut? We're going to cut the police. Are we going to cut the mental health services? Are we going to cut the drug rehab center and stuff like that? At which point, cut funding for the schools and all that sort of stuff. At which point, I'm like, well, yes, I would be in favor of all that. Cut the spending all over the place, and cut the spending on the hockey rink because that is a new that's a new bill. It's not just building the rink; its upkeep is there was nothing there that said that this wasn't going to continue to cost money in perpetuity. If I said that word right. Um, anyway, that was basically it. Public comment, there was none. As far as admin time, they just mentioned like the employee appreciation picnic, I think, coming up in the Gage Park. And that was about it. So that's going to wrap up this episode for me. Catch you on the next one. Bye.